relative to each other. So sand's like the size of a basketball, silt is the size of a golf ball, and clay is a dot. So that range is what you're seeing under the microscope, and that's why if you just have sand, you lose all your nutrients and your water drains really fast.
You're listening to How I Grow This, exploring stories of gardeners from across the globe as we learn from their biggest tips and tricks to some of the things not to do. I'm your host, Luke Hammond. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the How I Grow This podcast. I'm super excited that you're here today because my guest, Matt Powers, is probably going to use some words that you've never heard before, and he's probably going to maybe inspire you to go a little bit deeper into your gardening, wherever that is. So if you don't know Matt Powers, the permaculture student, he's got a really unique story. Everything from starting out in his childhood with like professional level downhill skiing and blowing his knee out to be like, oh no, what am I going to do now? I'm going to become a professional musician. And now he's like, I'm going to become a professional citizen scientist using my past of teaching and all this stuff. And he's going to blur these worlds together and blow your mind. So, Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm ready to dive deep.
Awesome. Well, one of the things that we always talk about kind of first is context and how important context is in building a healthy garden. There's so much on the internet everywhere. Like there's stuff everywhere, and it kind of blows people's minds, and they don't know where to really try the tools or techniques that they're learning because it doesn't fit where they're at. Those are the wise ones. A lot of people are like, I'm in Maine and I like that guy in, the tropics, and we're going to try what he's doing because it looks awesome. But it doesn't fit. So let's talk about your current growing context. Where are you at? What are your high humidities? What are your high temps? What are your lows? And just talk about the context so people get a grip of your garden as we get into that.
So important. In permaculture, we always talk about, what's your climate? What microclimates can you create to stretch where you're at? And in soil science, it's so much the same. And what I discovered in my journey was that effect that you're talking about was affecting permaculture. So everyone loved Toby Hemingway, and he wrote Gaia's Garden. It sounds so good, right?
Right.
And everyone wanted to do it, but it was Oregon permaculture, so it's like, it was so specific, and a lot of people tried things and failed because of that. So I had to learn early on, I could not teach myself. I can share what I do, where I am at, but I have to explain my context and why I'm making those choices so that it touches upon a paradigm of understanding, a framework of understanding that includes me and them along that. And most people don't have a framework of understanding, and so they don't know the science, they don't know the context, they're not really familiar with nature, and so they get pulled by every shiny object on the internet, and they try this, they try that, they try that, they try this year I'm going to try, and it's part of the fun for some of these folks. They want to just try fun things. It's just not novelty, right? But those of us who want success, we need to map those things out to really understand them. When I first, where I'm at right now is Texas, Eastern Central Texas. And I had some interesting lessons. I had come from California, and I had grown in Missouri, Southern California, Northern California, Central California, as well as Washington State. So I had somewhat of a diverse, background, but 8B is not 8B. So Zone 8B in Texas is not Zone 8B in California. You cannot buy trees from California. I'm sorry, I tried groworganic.com. It wasn't good enough. Everything got destroyed. And so our winters here are harsher. We have more of an erratic nature to the weather. I mean, we have tornadoes, right? So California does not have that, unless there's something else going on artificially. But it was really humbling moving here because the first year we got here, it was the tail end of the summer. It was all moist subtropical. Gave me
Hmm.
the wrong impression. That's what this year is. It's been 5 years, right? And so or 4 years. So it was just, no, it was 4 years. That's crazy. So we didn't plant. We just experienced it. And then the next year was the hottest year on record and the driest year on record in Texas. And they banned watering your garden in my county. And I learned some things. One of the things I learned is asparagus, can go through that experience and not be watered and still regrow,
It's powerful.
which is seriously powerful. Most folks, and if you think about it, think about how thick those asparagus roots are. They're thick, right? And
Hmm.
often when you buy them, they're pretty dried out. They're not completely dried out, but there's such a resilience to that plant. It's incredible. But that first year I got just nailed.
So
It was
knowing
a
no, no, okay, you
I'm in
got me. You
Texas.
got me here.
It's hot. I'll do the ranges for you. So
Hold.
it'll get up to like 112. It'll get down to, 18 degrees over the course of the year. We'll have sometimes a year where it's freezing cold, like you're in Maine for 10 days straight and kills all your fruit trees that aren't designed for that. You'll have years that are so hot and so dry that it kills your pears and your apples and your things that like can't handle that either. You really have to get through a sweet spot of a few years of young growth of your trees to get them resilient enough to handle the bad years. So you could start on a bad year, you could start the year before a bad year, and you could have bad luck. My friend who has 300,000 acres on the west side of Texas says, in Texas, it depends on the year what grows.
Well, you totally were like, okay, we kind of like glazed over this here. So, first year in Texas, subtropical. So you're having all this rain. You're like, man, okay, I think I got a good grip on like what it is. Permaculture kind of teaches, hey, don't do anything for a year, step back, observe nature, observe what's going on. But in that particular case, you did that. Come spring, knowing you probably bought a bunch of trees, you started planting, you started building this permaculture garden with canopies and perennials and all this stuff together, and then it just dried up.
Yeah, and I couldn't water it. My well dried up, and then the county was like sending people around. And you know how they deal with you here in Texas? It's Texas. So
They
they
just hang
catch
you,
you
or
watering your garden, they turn your water off for a week for the whole land, and that kills your
interesting.
garden. And so you don't
Interesting.
do that again. Yeah, they don't play. I mean, they play rough. So I was like hand watering at like 5 a.m. before like it got light and you could see me like my each individual tree. So I didn't get to the asparagus because those were in lines along the rows. So that was a
Gotcha.
lesson. What I've learned is as we're in a flood area, flood zone, traditionally. And so there's lots of sand. There's pockets of clay, but it's mostly silty sand. And it's bacterial dominant, of course. Sand, when you look at it under the microscope, looks like what it is. It looks like little tiny chunks of glass. You melt it together, you make glass, right? And so what happens when sunlight hits that? It
It's hot.
carries that light and concentrates it and refracts it. And that's why the sand heats up so hot.
Mm.
So if you have bare soil, you're toast here. You have to have serious mulch. A lot of people are like, just do wood chips, just do wood chips. But in this climate, you really have to stay after the balance because of the heat. You tend to have the Fenton reaction hit you even when you have coverage. So you need to cover it. You need multiple canopies. You need to be spoon feeding your microbes and water soluble calcium foliar sprays at certain times. It's so humid and hot here that the calcium transport shuts down in your plants. And so
Hmm.
you have to do water soluble calcium or, compost tea a lot, or compost extract a lot because that has water soluble calcium in it to a smaller degree. But most people they're going to take oyster grit, they're going to take eggshells, they're going to take crushed limestone, and they're going to be putting that in vinegar and then letting that sit for a little while and then spraying that on their plants because they're getting fungal blights. They're getting pest damage. I mean, we have hordes of grasshoppers and crickets, and they cover everything. And if your plants are healthy, they're like there with the bugs, and the bugs are like waiting, waiting, and they don't eat it, but they're all there. Like they're like unless you're spraying something you shouldn't be spraying, the insects are all going to be there in Texas and the central tropics. It's the tropics.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that you notice here is that compost goes really fast. I think the
Mm-hmm.
Johnson stew is the best form in this climate. I've tried to do pit composting. It goes very fast once the black soldier flies find it.
So when you say the compost goes very fast, meaning the decomposition is so active, it just reduces. So as you're applying compost, you may apply 1 year, but that compost is virtually all gone based on decomposition. What do you mean? Or is
Well,
it just the
if your
compost
nitrogen
pile
and
that you're?
carbon if your nitrogen and carbon's off, of course that's going to happen, right?
Right.
And then if it's really hot and your soil's pH 8, that is also going to happen. So, yeah, that can totally happen. And so that's why you got to spoon feed it. Like I do EM like
Mm-hmm.
weekly. So I'm hitting it with
Mm-hmm.
my water mixed with something that's 3.5 pH to really kind of like hit that down a little bit. So it is pretty gnarly growing here. You really have to. I mean, people bring truckloads of like compost to like build their soils for market gardens, and then there are people who have built soil with 250 truckloads of wood chips. So I'm always at a debate whether to go all in on training the plants to be extreme. The problem is when you train plants to be more extreme, they're less fruitful, and you don't get the soil benefits because they're so stressed. So
Mm-hmm.
they'll survive and give you seed, and you're like, I grew with no water, and your soil's terrible. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like I can get something to survive in 140-degree soil, but is the soil beneath that happy? And
Right.
it's like
Right.
no. And so I really I'm actually moving on to a new site right now. And everything's about building static, long-term compost, leveraging biochar as a stabilizer. I know it's pH 8, but remember I'm adding so much I'm adding EM even to my composts. So I control that because hot compost is hot because it's oxidizing, just like a flame is oxidizing wood. A hot compost is oxidizing, so it's going to get hot and it's going to burn things off, and you're going to lose carbon and nitrogen. So I
Right.
want to control that as much as possible with EM because that turns the nitrogen into directly into amino acids, and then the
Mm-hmm.
cellulose gets turned into polysaccharides. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I like EM1 so much. Effective microbes. The Terra Organics is the representative for EM row here in America, but these are microbes we all know and love. When I started out in California, I was drinking so much water kefir because of my stomach problems that I was using water kefir grains in my compost and in my compost tea. And that's the majority of what EM is. It's lactic acid bacteria and yeast. There's also provolone
Mm-hmm.
bacteria and a bunch of other guys in there that are incredible. That's why EM1's special. But water kefir has yeast. Water kefir has tons of lab. Lab is going to transform that, and lab and yeast are going to transform that cellulose, that organic matter.
So
So,
for those who don't know, what is water kefir? They may be familiar with
oh,
a dairy kefir or something like that, but what is water kefir for those who don't know?
okay. Thanks, Luke. Thank you. I I like the milk kefir. You guys can get the milk kefir. That's great. I really like A2 milk, and I want ice cream, and I like all those fun things. I make my own ice cream with straight up A2 milk, cream, a little bit of coconut sugar and vanilla. But when it comes to like drinking a beverage, I don't drink alcohol, and so this is like my beer. This is like water kefir is it's really, really good. It is there's there's all this stuff in our past where we had like young wine or new wine or medium drinks, not heavy drinks, not, you know what I mean? Like there were all these other things that were intermediary where you didn't finish brewing it or it hadn't fermented to the second stage to form like strongly form alcohol. And they were all probiotic. And all of our
Hmm.
ancestors drank them because when you needed to drink, you needed a drink. And all of us experienced all these different stages of fermentation. Water kefir is an early stage fermentation. You could bottle it. I know people have actually turned their water kefirs into beer and actually made alcohol. I always time mine so that never happens. But what it is it's lactic acid bacteria and yeast. And no, the story of where it came from is actually like contentious. So there's like a bunch of people who have theories. No one really
Hmm.
knows where it came from. Some people suspect that water kefir, just like milk kefir, was being kept in a bag that was from a stomach from an animal, like a goat. Some people took I can't remember that. Tibicos, there we go, is the name of these crystals that turn into gel when they're hydrated on cacti in Mexico, and they say that's where water kefir is from. They took those little gels and they just grow and create this drink. Other people say this all started at the tops of mountains where mountain springs are coming out and the microbes that are globules and little scobies, like if you know kombucha, right there at the source of water, and these medicine men and different people from different societies, and you can pick your name, shamans and stuff. They're taking that water and bottling it with herbs and other things, and the microbes are unlocking and making bioavailable the medicinal qualities in those plants, and then they're giving them to people, right? So those are the theories around it. I don't really know, and I just am happy that it exists. All those stories are fun as well, but that's what it is.
Leaf fermentation with
Yeah,
water as a base. Perfect.
and it
Perfect.
could have
Perfect.
come from milk kefir. We don't even know.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I know a lot of people were going to ask that question because it was like, I think there was like three or four things you zoomed past that I was like, oh, I'm going to have to circle back around to. I'm going to have to circle back around to. So let's start at the beginning of this new garden build. Okay. You have this new garden build coming up.
Hmm.
You've kind of verified your plot. You've verified your design. What are you going to start at to build this soil and kind of transform this ground from, you know, Texas, poor fertility, poor bioavailability, nutrient flow. And what are you going to do to transition that and get a thriving garden?
So two things. I'm going to be setting up an area where I'm in the ground, but I'm also going to be setting up an area that's lifted so my wife can help. My wife hasn't been in the garden for a few years, but she wants to be. And so having and I know you're like the temperature, Matt, raised gardens that will cook them. Yeah, I know, but this is how she can participate. And there are a lot of people who I teach, who are older who can't, bend down and do things all the time. And so I'm gonna have to create shade. I'm about to
Hmm.
create some serious shade for that. But but that way my wife can participate and join me in the gardening experience like we used to. And that's really
Yeah.
meaningful for me personally. So so
What
that's
what's
that's that's gonna be one of those things that I'm gonna be manufacturing that soil, but I'm still
right.
gonna use Texas soil.
Sure.
So, yeah, I might set it up so that my organic matter starting out's 20 to 30%. You know what I mean? 10% to 15% biochar, right? And then,
Right.
but I will 100% be 50% our local soil. And I'm going to try to not just get sandy, silty soil. I'm going to try to find a clay pocket on this land and put that in there too. You know?
Hmm.
The thing that
Right.
I learned from Chris Trump, the natural farmer, a while back, was that even with him, in order to get uh, in order to get soil right in an indoor growing situation, because he gets brought in for all of these situations where they're trying to set up permanent beds indoors, so they don't have to
Mm-hmm.
flip the soil. It's a cannabis thing. And so he gets brought in, and he insists they must have actual clay, sand, and silt because it doesn't work otherwise. And so I'm always gonna have that. I know a lot of people get like, oh, we just need good compost. We're gonna grow in good compost. And I love Elaine, but I think a lot of that started with Dr. Elaine Ingham saying that whole story where there was just sand and then just compost, and all you really need is compost. And look at the squash growing in your compost pile. Look, all it needs is compost. Yeah. Long term structuring soil past heavy feeders like squash, your plants, your microbes, all these things need the clay, sand, and silt. They're all silicates. They conduct energy and information as well as hold it. So we have the ability to partner with these things, and so I'm going to be doing basically the Chris Trump method, without the IMOs, because he uses IMOs, different IMOs in different sections, and I'm going to be doing different compost types. I'm going to be doing mulch on top, but
Mm-hmm.
I will have that sublayer of soil that's just soil. I mean, that's just like the subsoil that we would find out here, and
Mm-hmm.
then I will have the mixture of clay, sand, silt, and I'm going to make sure that I mix in organic matter with it at that level, and then the higher level, that's the topsoil, that's going to be heavily leaning more towards compost, and then I'll have a
Gotcha.
mulch layer on top. And I'll do that just like I would if I was indoors, but I'm going to do it outdoors, and we're going to have shade. I'm going to get into doing carpentry and building and stuff outdoors. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm, I did this all the time when we were on family land with my boys growing up, but I've been on rentals for the past 7 years. So this is
Mm.
like, or 9 years. Oh my gosh. So yeah, this is like liberation for me. And
Right.
then in terms of the ground itself, the first thing I'm going to do is amend it. So I'm going to do rock dust. I'm going to do biochar. If I can get my hands on enough compost, I'll do that. If I don't have enough compost, I'm not going to do that, because the thing is, it's like the compost extract and tea extend it so much further in terms of its actual
Mm-hmm.
efficacy that
Mm-hmm.
it's just not worth it to mix in compost straight up. I'll put, when I'm done with the compost bag, in the extract, I'll put it somewhere and deposit it, but usually under a tree or something, and under the wood chips, and then but especially because you've watered it down, so it's less shocking to the tree. Trees and annuals, they have a completely different like food requirement, and so you want to like keep it calm with like the trees and perennials, and you can
Mm-hmm.
get a little bit spicier with our annuals, but like nitrates, like please
Mm-hmm.
be nice to your trees. So I'm going to be amending it, and depending on what I can get access to, I might either have to sheet amend it and create like a system where I'm and that if I have enough compost, I would do sheet and then have it basically with microbes melt together and compost in place.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tarp that and speed that up, use EM to guide that process. But if I don't have enough and I can work that all in, then it's cover crop time. Really depends on what I'll have available and access to when I do these things. I'm setting up the compost as I go. I've got a Johnson Sioux at the other house that's big, but it's not a field. You know what I mean? And
Right.
so I'm going to be building a ton of composts.
Mm-hmm.
The the cover crops I would do here are going to be focused on reducers. So amaranth, I know everyone loves my amaranth. I'm not gonna lean into that because it's already pH 8. That wouldn't be a good idea. So I want to shift it more to acidifiers and reducers. So it's oxidized, lacking in energy, and it's alkaline, right? So it's high in hydroxide, low in
Mm-hmm.
protons. And so I want to shift things the opposite direction as much as I can. And that means I need buffering with organic matter and I need microbes. And so we're always going to have the calcium that's here. We're always going to have the limestone bedrock. We're always going to have these alkalinizing elements. But the more organic matter we can hold, it's a physical. It's like it literally is a physical barrier between these alkaline elements and
Mm-hmm.
alkaline. Really, they're chunks. They look like chunks of glass. So sand is a relative to each other. So sand's like the size of a basketball. Silt is the size of a golf ball, and clay is a dot that you would make with a chalk piece of chalk. So
Mm-hmm.
that range is what you're seeing under the microscope. And that's why if you just have basketballs, just have sand, you lose all your nutrients and your water drains really fast because
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing to fill in the other spaces.
Right.
So we get really, really great drainage here. Roots travel down pretty deep, but also lateral moving nutsedge and laterally moving Bermuda grass can grow 2 feet deep because of that
Mm-hmm.
sun being conducted all the way down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to, if you're okay talking about it, I want to click back in because so many people are in
Mhm.
this place. I know a little bit of your story, but um, you mentioned your wife being able to garden with you again. What's going on there to where she can't just go out in the garden and needs a raised bed, or a elevated raised bed? And what are you going to do to this raised bed? Are you going to make it even higher?
No, no,
What
I've
are your
never
plans
had
there?
I've never, like, had raised beds. We've always done it in the
Okay,
ground.
okay,
Like, I've always been in the ground, usually no fences.
right, right.
Everyone's like, "How is this possible?" So that's, like, usually what I do. But my wife is a seven-time cancer survivor. She had radiation, when 18 years ago when we were really young, and they told her, certain things would happen. And so we're just kinda dealing with, some of the consequences from
It's
that
just
and current
challenging.
issues and challenges and CIRS and mold and different things like that. And so, yeah, no, it's, super hard on her to do that kind of thing, and has been for a while. And so this is a way that she wouldn't have to bend down, and do that sort of work, and this would be easier on her body, and she'd be able to participate more, and she's excited about it, so I'm
That's
excited.
awesome. So, are you going to create kind of like a bench around, like a raised bed with kind of the benches that you can kind of sit on, maybe like a 2x6 platform
That's
for
interesting. I not yet.
okay. No, I mean I've seen all these different techniques, and it's
Yeah.
some of the like feedback that I get from different growers from all over that may have mobility issues
Mhm.
is when you add like a 2x6 strong layer on the top of these raised beds, you actually have like a bench that you can sit on and kind of turn sideways and harvest or prune or
Oh, that's cool, I
cultivate
like
or
that.
and
And then
so
you could sit
it's
in the garden.
yeah, and it's everywhere in the garden. It's
Yeah.
everywhere around the perimeter of all your raised beds. So it's a really aesthetic look, a beautiful kind of landscaping technique that a lot of people do who have mobility issues, and I think that's a super cool way to kind of dig into that a little bit. Um, so anyway, awesome.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
so yeah, no, health challenges has been a huge part of our story, and, yeah, I mean, as much as we share, we're very, very, private as a family.
right.
We've very few guests we have over, and my wife has only been on camera really once.
Coming from
So
the
so
guy
we're
who
very
goes
off
to, I don't
camera.
know, 37,000 like conferences a year or something like that. So you're traveling all over the place, and doing that. Quite the challenge.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, we used to do everything together. We used to do jobs. Like we did coat
mhm,
check together in New York City and nightclubs when we were young, but that was a long time ago.
mhm,
I'm just really grateful to be able to have gone through so much. If you guys don't know
mhm.
my story with my wife, Unstoppable Enthusiasm is a good book to read. That the opening of it really chronicles, a lot of what we've been through. And yeah, there are definitely health challenges, but getting into this new space, getting into like a hyper medical grade air, medical grade clean space is going to be transformative. So I
Wow.
have great hopes for the future, and there's always new things coming up. I see all these new medical things, regenerative health. Let's go! I
Yeah.
get all excited, and then there's of course the price tag. But we work these things out. We figure it out.
Right. Well, everyone's rooting for you. I just wanted to kind of double click in there because you just said something that left everyone hanging. So I want to talk a little bit. You brought this up several different times. You talked about bacterial dominance, and then you talked about Johnson Su
Hmm.
and Johnson Su compost. And many of our listeners may not know the difference there and what the process is as to why um, these two composts are not made equal. And
Wow.
I think you're the guy to talk through that to them. So, the
Sure.
Johnson Stew that you're creating, is that first? I'll just let you go into talking about Johnson Stew compost versus a regular, like compost system and the differences therein. I'll just let you talk about it.
So Dr. David Johnson at New Mexico University and his wife created the Johnson Sioux compost. It is a combination of all the best composts. It's a static, no turn compost, but it has tubes for aeration. So it starts off hot, so it's thermophilic. It's semi aerated, just passively, and then you put in worms once it's cooled, so it's vermicompost, and then you leave it for a year, so it's moldering.
Hmm.
So it's all of the compost in one, and by doing that, he's created the best compost that I've seen. And people will take just leaves. Like in Utah, I have this guy who took just leaves, composted it for a year in a Johnson Sioux, and it had the highest numbers I'd ever seen in fungal counts.
Hmm.
So much beautiful fungi, and it's so simple. It was the leaves from the neighborhood, and it was easy to do. You're putting these tubes, and then you're leaving it, and you're watering it on a schedule and stuff with a little like timer and a ring. But that's it. And so people are doing this all over because A, it saves your back because you're not trying to turn a hot compost every other day and trying to check the temperature, check the check the moisture levels and like everyone like hot compost kind of burned everyone out because it was so hard to get right and so demanding. They're like, I don't pay this much attention to my children. Like it's too much.
I only pay this much attention to my sourdough bread.
But for real. And then at the end of the process, what do you get? You tend to get something that's bacterial, alkaline, high in nitrates. And I'm not saying all hot compost is bad or anything like that. That could
Right.
be exactly what you need.
Right.
But for a lot of people, they thought compost was this balanced, perfect thing that every time you added it, it just made things better. And the
Hmm.
problem is, it's like, well, pH 8 and high nitrates, nitrates are NO3, carrying a lot of oxygen, right? So if you're in a reduced, really acidic natural soil state like Montana, like Eastern Washington, Idaho, you're going to add that hot compost and it's going to lift you away from aluminum being solubilized. And so you're going to love that. But if you're in Southern California, Central California, even Northern California, you add pH 8 to pH 7.5 soils or pH 7 soils, you're pulling it away from nutrient availability and you're locking things up and you're screwing up your pH. And you might be like, oh, but I'm making a compost tea about it. It's going to be mostly water. It's that pH. Yeah, but a lot of these guys are making their entire, soil mix for their indoor grow with 30% compost. Now, 30% point eight pH 8, is going to have a much more significant impact. So folks have to recognize, and if you're top dressing things and you're adding it all at once and then watering it in, all that nitrate's going to be watered right down to your roots all at once, and it's going to be gum. And then you're going to have a fungal problem, or you're going to have an explosion of growth, and nitrates require 4 times as much water. So the cells are going to be large and watery, and blight's going to get in there, or pests are going to get in there physically. So yeah, I like thermophilic compost, but at the end of it, all you got to do is put on that 3.5 pH EM or water kefir, and then bring that back down to a reasonable area. So don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. You're like, I just did a hot compost, man. No, just recognize that you can change things, and nothing is static. Nothing is over. Nothing is bad. That's the other thing. The dichotomy of good, bad is so messed up. Johnson Su, the reason people love it so much is it gets a more uniform result of high fungal numbers. And people are finding that they also make a range of expression depending on the food stock. So it can be mostly fungal dominant, but then also pathogen rich ones. And I mean, not pathogen, predator rich ones. So predators will go out and control the population and cycle things. A lot of people have the prey. They got a lot of bacteria, and some of them people have some fungi. That's mostly the prey in the pyramid of the food cycle. At the pyramid at the top, you have got a few nematodes, then you got a bunch of protozoa, then you have a lot of fungi, then you have a lot of bacteria. And so it's like that. You might have one or the other when these composts come out and you compare them together. So it's really, really good. And because you're using worms and hot compost, you're really controlling pathogens in a I would say a gold standard way.
Uh-huh.
And if you add EM into that, that's lactobacillus, and that is biocontrol specifically. That's the kind of stuff we use to ferment food, and that's why it's biocontrol. That's why we use it to ferment food, because it allows to avoid spoilage.
Mm-hmm. So for those who are listening that are like, what are the tubes he's talking about? What do you mean tubes? Most often, these are sewer pipes that are about 3 or 4 inch in diameter that have holes along that pipe in order for air to pass through and then shift that oxygen up through it. A lot of times people will drive them vertically or horizontally, depends on the system of what's holding in that compost into a shape to where there is some thermal mass still there. There's still the composting principles that apply. It's basically compost with oxygen. And it's a pretty cool thing. Some people will do forced air to where they actually have a blower on a timer and they do forced air every so often through that cycle. But the big advantage is you don't, like Matt was saying, you don't have to shovel and mix and add that oxygen in. It's a natural kind of oxygen flow through that pile because of the tubes or the PVC piping with the holes in it. So you unlocked a bunch of different questions, not like a video game. It's like ding, 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 like unlocking questions. But you unlock these questions of nutrient flow relative to pH.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of trains of thinking behind like Albrecht method and how much is the pH, the potential of hydrogen, actually tying up the nutrients compared to the balance of the nutrients themselves. Let's talk a little bit about what pH is, how it expresses itself in a soil profile, and why not to panic when you see pH. Because that's the first thing. Every new gardener, every grower, the first thing they talk about is pH. I'm like, why are we talking about pH? Like, let's talk about that last, right? So
So
go ahead and
it's the seed
dive in
of the
there.
hydrogen cycle. So pH is really the seed of the hydrogen cycle, and that's the way they don't teach it that way in schools. They don't teach it that way in gardening courses, except mine. so so when a plant is doing photosynthesis, if it's healthy, most plants are going to be releasing protons dominantly. And that displaces cations off of the surfaces of clay, sand, no, clay, silt, maybe a little bit off of the sand, and then the organic matter. And so it's bombarding the soil, and that's actually what EM1 does after you extend it. Is it floods itself with protons, and so you add it to the soil, and it releases the cations in a flush to the so when there's stress, they release hydroxide, and protons are H plus, and then hydroxide's OH negative. And so OH negative is used to displace the anions. And so the plant is actually releasing at the root growing tip all the acidic things. And as the roots age and the root hairs age, they begin to release more hydroxide and they become more alkaline. And the plant, in order to like do all these things, has to differentiate itself. And so it becomes more reduced over time. And so you have this ability for plants to dictate somewhat, but they're dominant. Just like the plant needs nitrate and ammonium, they need one dominant at one time and one dominant at another time, but they both need both. They always need both. Just like a plant is predominantly producing oxygen, but at night it respires and breathes in oxygen too. Life is like that. Life is this give and take. Life is this inhale and breathing. Life is cyclical. And so I see pH as part of the plant physiology and the end product of photosynthesis. Because in order to do photosynthesis, they need H2O, they need water, and they need to do hydrolysis. Hydrolysis is the breaking up of the H2O. Well, where do you think that oxygen comes from that they're releasing? Comes from that H2O and CO2. It's all part of the same chain of processes. And so you end up releasing oxygen from CO2, H2O, and the H2 gets turned either to OH negative, and then you're using up that oxygen and releasing it into the soil profile, oxidizing the soil, losing energy from the soil. Crazy, right? Or you're adding it, H plus. So you have this situation where the plant is literally a living pH, like push or pull. And so when your plants around their root zone, they're going to acidify it always to open up and create this differential so that they can pull things off. If they're the same, nothing happens. Everything's static if everything's the same. They need to be different. This is why my friend Josh, who is a farmer, one of my students in Eastern Washington, it's like, man, I'm doing all this natural stuff. I'm at pH 5, but my plants, as they do this, are releasing the aluminum. And so they're becoming more acidic. And I'm like, yes, unless you bring up the soil profile high up enough so that it can acidify and not go too acidic, you're not going to be able to get away from that because the plant has to create a differential. So the plants have to do this. They have to do this to survive. It releases these different nutrients. And so it really tells you from a baseline perspective which nutrients are available, more available, and less available. Again, it's that combination of both, right? It's always going to, because there's going to be microsites. Your pH you shake up and combine, and it's an average, in other words. You're going to have areas that are more acidic and more alkaline, always. So this gives you an idea. And what you're going to see is there's a correlation directly between moisture and pH. All over the world, the more acidic soils are related to where there's more water and moisture and humidity. you'll find in the more arid climates all over the world, at a global level, they're the drier, more alkaline areas and
Hmm.
oxidized. And so that's like the bigger picture, but you will have soils that are like super high in aluminum and they're acidic despite it being oxidized and dry and not
Right.
very moist. So you have those contradictions in there. Again, it's that whole everything is nature's going to do everything, right? It's going to teach us, keep us humble.
Hmm.
And so pH though wakes you up
Hmm.
because you might be like, "Oh, I'm super dry. Matt said dry is this and now it's alkaline." But you didn't pH test it. And now you're doing the wrong things.
Hmm.
And so it tells you fundamentally where you are from a perspective. And it can't be your only perspective. And just like biology can't be your only perspective. When I got into doing microscopy, I was shocked that they didn't do other tests. I was like, you just do the biology? They're like, you don't need anything else. Biology trumps everything else. And if you ask any questions, and I was like, ah. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to pH test mine. And so I went quietly on my own, pH tested it, and it was like, pH 8, what's going on? And then I was like, Matt, use your freaking brain. It's hot because it's thermophilic. That's a reaction. It's oxidizing. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's partnering with oxygen with the age, right? And so
Hmm.
you're adding more oxygen in, and oxidized elements are locked up and insoluble. And so they're not bioavailable to plants. And so you begin to see this pattern emerge and you go, okay, but it's not good or bad. You broke down that compost and the organic matter fast to create your hot compost. Awesome. But let's use EM now to get things back under control and make it safe to add back in. And
Hmm.
water kefir, EM, all these microbes that are in this, they're actually endophytic to the plant. They belong to the plant. And they
Hmm.
actually belong in our gut too. And so that's part of the loop of information and communication between ourselves and local food.
Right. Right. And
I teach for weeks on these concepts. And
right.
so like we're touching upon lectures that are like 6-hour long lectures of mine. And so I may go like too deep in areas, may not generalize enough in other areas. I apologize. But if you check out my book, Regenerative Soil, I go through the cycles. I go through everything visually so you can see what they actually are and then what you actually hands-on can do. And chemistry, biology, everything's quite different when you physically can see it and deal with it and do something and see it react and go, "Oh, well, that's the thing that I'm looking for and it's there." So, I really value the pragmatic actions that actually you can verify and everything that you can verify because there's a lot of navel gazing in the science.
Yeah, I think there's so much there that could be unpacked in different ways. And I'm always trying to think from the lens of the majority and helping
Right.
them from wherever they're at to wherever they need to go. And you're not here to, or they're not here to kind of tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, what was that? What did he say there? So I'm just trying to figure out what is the biggest question I could ask? Because I have all the questions that I want to ask and be like, what do you think about
Just go
this?
with it. Let's go.
So for those who don't know my story, I used to work at a soil prebiotic company that was a large one, shipped to 40 different countries all over the world. And I had the opportunity of, with a team of people, basically reviewing people's soil reports from all across the nation. And when you get to review soil report after soil report from different lab after different lab, you get to see all these different patterns. And within these patterns, you get to be on the phone with people that are asking um, the questions generically from their extension office of what was recommended to them. And not all extension offices and extension office agents are equal. And so the advice that is given, they get broad stroke to try to make everything simple for people. And sometimes it really dampers their ability to grow. Usually not from the cost perspective. What begins to happen is they're spending the money on what is being sold to them by the person that is doing the consultation. And so, um, if somebody is just a home garden, Matt, where should they just baseline start um, to spend the least amount of money to get the best results in their garden on average?
Johnson Sue. The reason is because you give it the longest amount of time to fully calibrate to your environment and local microbes.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the reason why it's so good. Just like if we took my voice in this room and I said, hello, we recorded that sound and put it through a speaker and recorded it again 40 times, you would actually get the actual note of this room.
Mm.
You get the resonant frequency. It'd go, "Wah!" It would turn into a pure tone. And that's what we're doing with compost. And there are people now who are recomposting. So they've got 3 years of Johnson Su compost that they're just recomposting. And it's so super fine. I've never
Mm-hmm.
seen other compost like this. It's very super fine, like the way old growth forest soils feel velvety.
Mm-hmm.
It's
So, how
that.
much of that product would they use in their garden space? Is that 2 inches, 4 inches, a centimeter? Is that dusting? What is that?
Well, because it's so high value and so potent and powerful, I'm speaking specifically of Michael Stangel's Enviro Lawn Care.
Mm-hmm.
So he's been doing Johnson Su for years. He originally learned from Elaine, then he learned from me. He took lessons with Dr. Johnson Su as well, and he started this recomposting thing on his own.
Mm-hmm.
And he just does extracts and teas.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's so fine, the
Mm-hmm.
effects are so powerful, and he just brings it back in. He just takes that,
Mm-hmm.
the bag and just puts it back into the compost bin. And then he keeps adding to it like pumpkins in the fall and resetting it and goes again.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's putting the long clippings from his clients. So this is all
Mm-hmm.
feedback loop, right? Just like I was
Mm-hmm.
talking about the feedback loop to get purity. He's taking he's treating their sites with compost extract, mycorrhizal fungi, rock dust, kelp meal, like all these wonderful things. And then he's cutting their grass
Mm-hmm.
and taking it back
Mm-hmm.
and putting it in the compost. So the compost is like the nexus of the whole community. So it's getting
Mm-hmm.
endophytes and all these things from all over the community. And then it's going back into that same place that it was fed by. So you get
Right.
this compounding effect in the fineness of the humic compounds,
Mm-hmm.
but also the microbes just knowing who they are, knowing what's the job ahead of them. There's no surprises at this point.
Right.
And so he has figured out how to create probably, I think, the best example of what we should be recreating with all of our waste streams. And so whether, it's our food, our human manure, all these things,
Right.
refining it back down to something that is always beneficial and keyed, specifically keyed, because our manure
Mm-hmm.
should be keyed to our local bioregion. Our manure should
Mm-hmm.
be healthy. And if we're eating local foods, eat 100% will be keyed into the local environment. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really profound when you start getting into this, because it's like everyone's like, that's permaculture. But that's also regenerative living. That's also just good common sense once you understand the way nature works. And our ancestors, if they had this information, they would have done it this way. And they were composting, they were returning everything, they were doing all these things, but they would have done it and institutionalized it if they had understood, and we all
Mm-hmm.
would have benefited. But now we know, and so now we can get together and get these things and this common sense spread, because it'll help us save money. It'll help us have the best food, the best soil, the best plants.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's also the best business model. It's the most
Right.
pragmatic, and it's also the kind of clarity and straightforward thinking we want our children to have. Because that's, a straight shooter. That's a clear thinker. That's a clear mind. And it's all one thing. So
Mm.
I love it.
So Johnson Su is probably the one thing you should do to your garden to make the biggest long-lasting results and the
And
health,
that's
overall health of your garden. W- Can people
okay.
buy
So
Johnson-Su compost?
I would say that's a thing to do, and that'll take you a year, right? And so people are like, "Thanks, Matt.
To ma- yeah, to
A
make it
year
on
from
your
now, I'll
own.
see if you're right, right?"
Is
So
there
the
are there
flip
any
side is
commercial
what?
are there any commercial with Johnson-Su composters out there that you know of? Can people purchase that level of compost?
Beam Compost offers that, but Beam is different. They create a shelf-stable version of it. It's like
Right.
Play-Doh, and it is effective and it is good. So that it does exist. I would say for immediate results, though, check out EM1 from Terra Organics. If you
Hmm.
go watch a video, I have a playlist of videos on my YouTube. Effective Microbes EM1. You can get a 10% discount on your next purchase through them, and I'll explain ad nauseum everything I possibly can about EM. And what it is, it's I keep talking about how it controls decomposition, biocontrol, and its pH 3.5, all this stuff. It's simply selected endophytes that are also saprophytes. Endophytes are like the gut biome for plants, you know?
Hmm.
And so they belong to the plant, but they are also excellent decomposers, and they're also things that we can eat. So
Hmm.
the safety levels like through the roof. This is
Hmm.
yeast, lactic acid bacteria, purple non-silver bacteria. And you're like, you can eat purple non-silver bacteria. Actually, if you test the most expensive probiotic drinks, you'll find that it's in all of them.
Hmm.
And so again, these things are in our gut. They are informing us about the world around us. That's
They
what we
they
do.
should they should be in our gut. They
Yeah.
should be.
Yeah.
Should be. Depending on your diet and where you're choosing to partake of lunch. You know, they should be. Um, Matt, I'm gonna do a quick lightning round with you. Um, you ready?
Yes.
Like one sentence answers. What is your favorite garden tool?
I think my favorite garden tool is my 5-gallon bucket that closes all the way because that's how I make EM. And it's just like a miracle because everyone's like, it's going to explode. And I'm like, it never explodes. It's amazing. I love
That's
it.
fine. What is your favorite crop to grow?
It's corn, specifically the purple Peruvian Impossible Piscarantu corn that I adapted to North America and was the first person to do it.
There we go. Um, do you still snow ski?
You know, it was so expensive. I got to do it a little bit when James was like just a little bit older than a toddler, and we haven't done it since because it's just so much money. I dream of doing it all the
Hmm.
time, and I have a student that is willing to get me into Tahoe, or not Tahoe. Sorry. What is it? It's the one in Taos. It's a T word. He's
Taos.
an instructor over there. He's a student of mine. He's trying to get me over there. My son got injured right when we were supposed to go. It would have been the first time I'd skied in almost 20 years. So yeah, no, I dream of it. It is something that I'm also like nervous because it's been so long. I started skiing when I was 2. It's hard to explain when you learn to ski before you learn to really run. And I
Hmm.
started racing at 6. So this idea of competing on the slopes and going fast and doing things that are dangerous on skis was just like baked into my life. I was like in a little ski bum gang, and we would like the ski patrol never could catch us, and we were yeah. So I dream of it. I hope this winter we actually do it. But we just moved in a new house. I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to put too much pressure.
What did they say? You only live once. Um, Last question. Do you have a recommendation on a few of the different tools that you use, like a microscope, a pH meter, um, refractometer? Do you have any specific recommendations for those?
Oh yeah. So I actually have this microscope as we're giving away this base microscope, not this and not that, but this microscope is the highest level professional best microscope I recommend for doing soil, mycorrhizal fungi, plant, and compost evaluations and science.
Hmm.
And this is going to be given to a student who signs up for regenerative soil microscopy for free. So we're going to raffle it off. If you go to regenerativesoilmicroscopy.com, you can check it out. September 15th, we're starting the new season. And even if you don't win it in the raffle, you can get up to 37% off. So this i4 is special because it can have this thing right here. This is a special light. This light right here actually allows us to see mycorrhizal fungi without any stains. So it's very fast, very easy. And farmers need help. They need this device. They need people who will help them by bringing this device to their farm so that they can know, do I really need mycorrhizal fungi? Is it there naturally already? And then when they buy it, is this the right one to buy? If it's just spores, you don't want it. If it's propagules, sections of roots that are glowing because they have arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi in them, that's what you want. So you can vet it with this before you buy it. And then after it's put on your seed and you plant your seed, 7 to 10 days after they sprout, the seedlings, you can pull them out and look at those roots, and it'll tell you, because if it's partnered at the first root, it's systemic. So it's partnered with all the roots. So you got 100% inoculation on all your seedlings and their first roots, you're done. And if you do the right thing over the course of that year, cover cropping, protecting your soil, not using synthetic nitrogen, not over-tilling, not applying phosphate, you will have it there next year. And if you're like, not applying phosphate, yeah, arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi provides all the phosphate you need. And if you need extra and it's not in the soil, which it should, almost all soils have thousands and thousands of pounds, like hundreds of thousands of pounds in some case. You can do a foliar spray of phosphorus and just enough on your plants during fruiting if you need to, but you probably don't. So this is a huge win. With just adding EM1, you can remove 50 to 80% of your nitrogen. With adding arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi, you can be getting rid of your phosphate entirely. So this is why it's so important. We want to see if you have it. We want to see if you're inhibiting it by adding the phosphate. And we want to see if it's regenerative. Because once it's regenerative, it won't go away. And you just have this thing that raises 30 to 40% of your yield. Yeah, because you're bringing back the microbiome of the plant. So, but make sure it's there first. If it's already there, you don't need to add all those other things. So that's what I recommend, that microscope. I also recommend the microbiometer. That's an excellent tool to pair with microscopy. I recommend the Haney soil test because what Haney figured out was he imitated what the plant exudates were or are, instead of just like the M3 yeah. And so that's like an excellent one. I recommend that. In terms of tools, I love, a grub hoe. Like I really love a good grub hoe. There's nothing like those heavy-ended hoes to break through things, and that's the primary tool I use in digging and moving things around. And so, and I have a favorite shovel, of course, the same shovel I've used to do all the earthworks for over 10 years. So
awesome. Well, I hope you learned something new. I hope you learned a different word. I'm sure you did. I'm probably certain that some people are like having a different browser trying to use some of the different words and type them in if they can figure out how to spell them. But Matt, thank you so much for jumping into the How I Grow This podcast. I hope that this was informative to you and not over your head, but helped bring you to maybe another curiosity point to where you can keep growing in your gardening journey. Thank you everyone for listening. We're going to link everything in the show notes to find more about Matt Powers and what he's doing, his course, all of that kind of stuff. So check the show notes for that. And if you could, go online, like and subscribe the podcast if this resonated with you. And, if it didn't resonate with you, just be kind and not say anything. That's cool too. So thank you guys so much. Hope you're enjoying these. We're going to keep bringing them at you as fast as we can every single week. Blessings. Get out there and get in the garden. Have a great day.